Hi, I'm Tyson,
I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Adam.
and we're the Gamesmiths, and we just got done playing the Fairy Ring. We want to talk to you a little bit about our experience. To kick it off, Ryan's got some thoughts.
Yeah. So overall, I think we all really enjoyed your game. I know we all did. We just talked about it. Overall, it was a lot of fun. It was a solid worker placement game. There were interesting choices. There was, it felt familiar and different enough. Like, I got it. You put your workers here and they do a thing. But then there's also just kind of this straightforward, that track mechanic. You weren't really leaving people on the board for very long. You're just like, this is what I'm doing, and this is how many workers I had to do it this turn, and this is what I'm doing this turn. You know, I have 4 workers, they're doing this turn. I have 3 workers, they're doing this turn. And kind of boom, 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 boom. And it kept moving, and I always hate it in worker placement games when I run out of workers. And it's kind of my fault, and I know that's kind of like the strategy of a lot of them, but like, I hate it when I'm playing like Carcassonne and I'm just like, I got no guys. Like, you know, I'm just placing tiles with no people to put down. So the fact that we were always kind of churning over our people and how much we had worked, and to be honest, looking at the rule book, I wasn't quite sure how it would all actually play out, but when it all started playing out, it was very simple, and it was very just like boom, boom, boom. I can either, you know, gain magic, start something new and grow twice, or grow once, or just gain some magic if I'm helping a bunch of other people. And it became very clear of how I should, after a couple turns, how I should distribute my workers if I wanted them. Like, okay, if all my workers go out to help, that means I'm going to start earning a lot of magic. Or if all my workers stay here, that means my things start growing.
Yeah.
And the whole concept behind just the trades, or the favors, and just the concept of your workers working on other people's projects was new, and I think a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think, well, first of all, I was not expecting a game called The Fairy Ring with this type of theme and graphics and everything to be a pretty
Meaty
solid
thing, yeah.
Euro. Like, so that was a fun surprise when we got it out. I still
And we
didn't
couldn't
quite
stop
know.
laughing. We had to do so many takes before we even got started, especially with what the overview.
Yeah, I was just a little giggly
Yeah, it
today,
was-
and the game helped. So we had a whole lot of fun with all of it. So I was very surprised to see, right when I think Ryan started talking about the game, he said it was a worker placement, and it just threw me for a loop, because I thought, oh wow, it's not what I was expecting. But I think it was awesome. I think most Euros don't need much to change about them. People just like playing Euros because they like to solve a problem, or they like to figure out that like strategy of how do I. It's like a puzzle of sorts. But because there's so many Euros, it's nice. It becomes boring to see the same Euro over and over again, or solve the same problem again. So to have something that's unique enough to change the Euro, to make it interesting again, and to make it a new spin on the Euro, but doesn't change the core of what a Euro is, I think becomes very successful. And I think you did that very well. I like the spinning ring. Only one ring would spin, but that would change
Dramatically.
quite a bit. Only when that center ring spun, I felt like it didn't change a whole lot. But
Yeah.
when the first 2 rings, the further out bigger rings, changed it changed it quite a bit.
Yes.
So much so that I was the first to go, and every time I'd just be pretty disoriented, like, all right, a whole new strategy.
What's my strategy? Where am I
doing?
going?
Right. And so I think that really hit the spot for what I think the unique design element needs to be in a Euro. So what you touch and change as much as you can possibly change to make it interesting, and then what you completely leave alone because it's a Euro and you don't mess with it. And I think you did that really well.
I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the things that I liked that I didn't expect I was actually going to like. We've seen a lot of games attempt to try and pull off asymmetric abilities. And it's a tough nut to crack. And I don't know that you're completely there yet with this, but I was very surprised to enjoy it quite as much as I did. There was one point at which I pulled off something that I felt, oh, this is really cool, where I ended up giving out almost all of my workers except one, and everybody ended up giving me tons of magic, and with my asymmetric ability, I was able to collect on extra magic for that. And that was just, and nobody saw that, and when that happened, they were like, oh, that's a problem. We're not going to let that happen again. And I felt like, okay, maybe I pulled that out a little bit too early. I should have just kind of slowly gathered up, and then being able to pull out those that favor system to be like, oh, it's not overpowered to have Tyson with all of this magic, because Colin just came in and swiped it all out from underneath me, and that experience was really cool to see that balance of. While it is a Euro, there's a lot of interaction in this game that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
And the interaction wasn't overly mean, and it was planned and well thought out, and so I felt like
Well, it could be mean,
It-
and then
no, but it-
but it affected your strategy.
But
where
exactly.
you're like, I'm not going to let that happen again. Like,
it's mean.
Right.
right.
yeah, oh yeah.
But it wasn't. It didn't have to be mean. You could play it mean, and then even if it's played mean, it doesn't feel like. The feeling I get is, all right,
Yeah,
you did
try
that.
it-
I'm
yeah, try
gonna
it
see what
again,
happens
see what-
next time, or I'm gonna get you back, or I'm
Right.
gonna get something out of you, and it felt really
Hey, you
good.
did something for him to get that favor token in the first place. So
Yeah, I did,
Oh,
and
fair.
You earned it.
Yeah. Someone ends up owing you. I guess
Right.
without, except for
But
me.
so, you're forced into
Like, I
getting
would take a
favors
double.
sometimes, though.
that
Like,
was
you're
tricky
forced
for
to-
me. Yeah,
Yeah, forced into getting favors. Sometimes it's like, oh my god, now I owe Adam 4 favors, and now he's calling in all of my favors, so I basically lose a whole turn. And I was like, oh no.
yeah. But going into the asymmetric powers, I thought that it was nice to have this unique ability that was different. It added a little bit of variety to the game. It spiced it up a little bit and made it so that there was enough replayability that I would be like, oh, I want to see what those other powers are actually, because I want to see how it works if I have this or that. And I could see myself being like, okay, we're going to play drafting these powers this time and see who gets what, or you're going to play in a different way that everybody gets to pick their powers, or like my own house rules could be made around some of these, and I don't often like house rules in games, but I could see myself wanting to experience those more.
Yeah, just so you can experience each different way to play, because there's so many different strategies. I don't even feel like the fairy I got, I didn't know that I figured it out completely, and I would like to replay
Yeah.
and say, okay, let me master this, and then I can move on to another fairy, master that one, and try to figure out what the best strategy for each one. Because especially with what I liked about the game is the starting out randomness. I like that each different time you don't know what you're going to get. You can't pre-plan this, because you can have a stack of 3 purple mushrooms, 1 white one, or 1 I don't know, just the randomness of your starting pool of create your strategy on the board of, I'm going for purple this time, I'm going for red this time, because I already have a mushroom. It's going to give me magic that's going to help me store up and create more points in whatever color I had. So I liked that you're not able to pre-plan, and the strategy is going to change based on just the opening sequence.
Yeah, I did enjoy that. The one thing that we did want to give some feedback on was, or I want to give some feedback on specifically, is the rules. I know you'd asked for some feedback on your rule book. Ultimately, you could, we didn't have to contact you to ask you questions. What we played was what we figured out just from reading your rule book. So however close we played to the intentions of that tells you how effective it was ultimately at conveying the rules. That being said, as someone who's read a lot of rule books, I would suggest you kind of have a mixed. I guess I'd suggest changes in formatting and tone. You have a rule book should be a very kind of clear statement of these are the rules to play. The document that sent me was more like someone trying to teach somebody to play, more if you were trying to write a script for someone to say this or do this, or trying to write a script for me when I was explaining it to people, less as just dry here's the rule. And I say formatting both in when I'm going through and looking for a rule, if you have important rules, bullet points, or things in lists with bullet points, as opposed to everything that you had were mainly paragraphs and sentences, it's easier to find particular rules or look for things that you want to look for. You know, just like, okay, I'm looking for something that pertains to growing. You know, I go to the growing section and there should be a couple, you know, here are the bullet points for growing. And then there can be a paragraph to describe that. And then the other thing that kind of tonally was off a little bit is you're including both what the rules are and like tips on how to play and how to win in the same kind of sentence and body of the text. So when you tell people, you know, when you start discussing favors, you not only explain how favors work, but you're also trying to explain the tactical value of favors. And that's confusing when you're just trying to learn the rules. So what I would prefer is just kind of a dry statement of here's the rules, and then after that, a like tips and tricks page that say favors are valuable, use them here, you know.
Here's an example.
Yeah, a good favor in the end game. So you did have very good examples, and that's where a lot of my feeling certain about how the rules worked came from, was from those like examples of play that were sometimes a little more clear than your rules, because you're just like 3 + 1 + 1 is 5. That's how many energy they get. And that was a very clear statement, as opposed to the paragraph before that explained it, which was just kind of a stream of consciousness, just more talking about it than saying what the rule is. You know, just say what the rule is and don't talk about it so much. It's going to be, you know, the role of someone who knows how to play the game to kind of explain that. But unless you have a like dry, clear, crisp rule book to start with, it's just like a list of rules and like dun 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 dun, or steps and how to play, without any type of commentary in it at all, it's going to be difficult. Not to say like we did enjoy your jokes in the intro and stuff like that, and that's all fun, you know, and so that's all fine. But there does need to be a like, do an intro, tell a story, tell some jokes, then like, all right, here's the rules, bam, 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 very dry, and then do like an example of play where you're telling a story about 3 friends sit down to play and give them names, and Bobby does this and Susie does that, and here's Bobby's turn, here's Susie's turn, and do stuff like that, and then comment and kind of throw your personality in there. But make sure at some point there's a very dry statement of the rules in as much of a list or bullet form that you can get for easy reference for people later.
And I think that one thing that you did with the rule book, and having not read through it and having only briefly perused it, one thing that I appreciated seeing was you did have an almanac or a glossary or an almanac of that type of thing is very important. But I think basically what you're saying, Ryan, attends to that. The reason you would have the almanac is that now you can clarify a lot of this stuff. Now you can see some of those tactical decisions. You could see some of that stuff put there, because you want to get people to read through those rules as quickly as possible to get into the game. And now, okay, wait, how does this work? Now we can reference the almanac. Now we can double check this stuff.
I did like that. Yeah, that was helpful. Like when we ran into, okay, well, what is this exactly?
Laying the
mean?
foundation.
Laying the
or-
foundation.
yeah.
What does that mean? And you're just like, okay, that means this, and when we figured out the rest of the rules from there. But yeah, and I think like a lot of it is like, for the most part, it's pretty good. I would, like I said, just reformat it. So each, you know, have more paragraphs and have more individual lines discussing individual rules. And then you'll see as you're breaking it in, okay, this sentence doesn't really fit with rule 1 or rule 2. It's just kind of something that's explaining. Maybe I take it out, move it to a how to play section or something like that. So yeah, just remember that the rules and how to play are slightly different, and make sure that you're just kind of clearly stating the rules and for easy reference. But overall, I think you have a really strong game here. We did have a little bit of clumsiness with the theme, as far as we didn't quite get how, like, understanding what a fairy ring is, and it's like a ring of generally the same mushrooms growing in like a ring pattern. Was each color its own ring that we were trying to build? We were building a ring of many colors. We were building that part didn't quite, why are we building certain mushrooms taller than other mushrooms? Is that
Or is
a
this
better
middle part
rig?
just the ring just because it's
so
in
we're
a circle?
so that was a little confusing, but like overall, like the mechanics were very solid. Like all of it was you
could see the
overlook.
design decisions in it that overruled the theme decisions, I think. Because I think the design decisions mechanically were there because, there's problems in if we give favor out, having the right amount of favor to go out, and how many people, how you can call it back, and these types of things, as well as the way that it rotates, and it was easy to see that there were a lot of strategic decisions made mechanically that sacrificed the theme. And I don't think the theme was bad. I thought it was
Right.
fine, but it didn't prepare me for the experience I was about to have.
And you're like, yeah, fine, whatever. Fairies, cool.
Right.
Like it's still a fun game, and it's not so off that I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
get it. I don't want to play this game anymore. So no, it was still it didn't quite click with, I've definitely played games where the mechanics fit better with the theme. I feel like, oh, I'm an explorer, and so I'm flipping over cards to see something new, or stuff like that. So there are things where like I'm not exactly sure what the rotation of the fairy ring is supposed to represent. It's a good mechanic. It's a lot of fun. It makes the game better, but I'm not sure exactly how it connects to the fairy theme.
I got the feeling of
but
like gear working kind of things, but
Sure.
it could have been a million other things.
Yeah,
It
like
didn't.
you're flying through a different part of the forest and seeing
Right.
different
Yeah.
kind of
Or
things,
and
like-
it could very well just be, but honestly, maybe it's also just the sign of solid mechanics that I'm like, yeah, this could be a clock tower
Right.
game, and these are just like you said, or it could be a steampunk game, and these are gears that are turning, and you could really I think you have a good solid set of mechanics here that you could kind of theme across anything.
Yeah.
So the fact that it doesn't necessarily 100% fit with this theme is fine, but just an observation.
Because you can absolutely look past the theme on this, and your experience is going to be the same. Because
Right, it was a really good game.
you've got to think through all these problems, and that's the appeal to the game more
Right.
than the theme. And that's what's great to it. One thing for me that kind of detracted from that experience that was provided was that I felt the length of the game. I don't have a problem with it being a long game. The problem I had was that the decisions that we made, and I'll admit that the experience that we had was probably one of your outlier experiences, where it was one of the longer types of things. Because when at the end, I took a gnome from Adam to have him work on my stuff, which ended up, he had 5 turns or something like that. So he had 5 turns he had to work on his, and I already had 2, maybe 3 on mine that we had to work through. And so that right there extended the game 7 turns.
And nobody was working on it.
And nobody was working on
He was working on
Adam's
Adam's
stuff. But I think that for me, I understand the reason why the butterfly is there mechanically. I understand
balance, right.
how it keeps that balance there and make sure that there's no runaway leader, that there's nobody who
Well, it also
unfairly-
gave us something to do on those 7 turns
Oh, yeah.
where a lot was going
But the
on.
choices that I was making on those 7 turns were far less interesting than the turns prior to that.
yeah.
Makes it feel
Well,
like
and
it
I have a
fizzles out
suggestion
little
that
bit.
could help that is that maybe if there's no butterfly in a section, you can help somebody. Like, for instance, one of us could have helped Adam complete his building to
Speed up
sweep
the-
away that process.
Yeah.
Because that was
or I
the
could
only
force
thing.
someone into helping me.
Yeah,
I still
or
have
force
favors
somebody
up.
into
'Cause Those
helping.
favors were worthless at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing you
That
could
was
do.
one thing I
Either that or
noticed.
make instead of favors just doing a tiebreaker, give extra points for having favors if they're not going to do anything at the end of the game.
Because ultimately, if Adam could have sped up that timer, he could have. It took. We decided 1 black butterfly to
Yeah,
make
I
the
won.
difference.
I won by 3 points. Which
So if
was-
he had stopped Ryan from grabbing 1 black butterfly, they would have tied. If he could have gotten his turn sped up a little bit faster, then it would have been better. And for me, that was one thing that I noticed, because I kept looking over there. I was thinking, okay, everybody is done. Why is it that throughout the entire game, workers could all pile on to help one another out, and you could recruit people and force people to work. But why at the end does it just change that dynamic entirely, where now there's a stack that really needs to get done, but nobody's going to do it?
And you don't want to. You may not want other people to get those extra points and go around and get the butterflies. So it's like, yeah, I actually will do a favor to Adam and
Right.
help him build that thing.
And
so
it's possible that there is the, you know, it is always the rule that you can't add to a project already.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I understand that, and maybe you change it for the last one. You decide instead of catching butterflies, but I think ultimately what you need to look at is the fact that those decisions are less interesting. It gives you something to do in the end game, and it is quick. But if you have that person that's working on that 5, and we were probably in the worst case scenario,
Right.
but even when you got like 7 players going through that same
Oh, yeah.
thing, you got one person that's at 5, 7 people have to go around. You start running out of butterflies. So I don't know, and yeah, you just ship more.
Well, and you
components,
just never, you don't, whether it's a story, a movie, a game, you don't want to plateau right at the end before you
Right,
end.
you don't want
You
that
want to
last
finish
part.
on this high.
Was it Lord
And
of the
then
Rings,
there's
the
a
third
win.
one, where you thought the movie ended like 3 or 4
Oh,
yeah.
no, that
times,
was-
and you're just
The
like,
Hobbit
let it be
was like
done,
that,
yeah.
too. Oh
and
my
and
gosh.
that's kind of that you don't want to run into that kind of experience here, and that is that what
yeah,
you're alluding
either
to?
it ends like you could either end it too quick and you're like, oh, it was just getting like we were just on this big climb here. Everyone was getting excited, the tension was building, and you don't want to end it too late where it's kind of been building for a while and then it just doesn't have anywhere to go and it just kind of
Right.
flattens out or even declines a little bit and everyone's just waiting for the game to end. And I think the game did stumble a bit at the end or fizzle a little bit at the end.
I would almost have it so you were forced to take like all of your workers, or essentially you weren't allowed to catch butterflies at all as long as you had mushrooms to grow. And so you could use all those those first, you could put extra workers on growing your mushrooms.
that's a good idea.
because you're not allowed to
reinforcement,
catch
yeah.
or something. I don't know. Like
Yeah, but
I
then
don't
that would
wanna-
You'd
right.
have to do that throughout the whole
that
game.
that would be tricky,
Right.
yeah.
I don't want to. Yeah, so I don't want to. I don't want to.
You can figure it out,
You have a
but-
very well designed.
Regardless
game
of
here.
all of that, I
think
would
the-
just say that if that experience were to maintain, based off of that experience, I would never play this game 7 players based off
Oh,
of that
yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Well, and the mushrooms are going to be much more spread out over 7 players, so it's going to be easier to just see the board and see, oh my gosh.
I also think
like
you're gonna,
I definitely
you're going to
lost.
get less 5s amongst the 7 in a 7-player group too.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Honestly,
we
though,
had
I
a very
think-
tight
yeah
point.
I think
like it was neck and neck and neck. So
Yeah, I think ultimately you have
Yeah,
a
that's
very.
what I said.
I think ultimately you have a very solid game here. I think our 2 critiques are, clean up the rule book a little bit, state your rules a little bit clearer, and separate your suggestions from your rules, and then there's the risk of the end game is less interesting than the rest of the game, and if it's going to drag on a little long, it kind of people are done with it before the game's done before they were very engaged. But overall, excellent game. We all had a lot of fun. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.